I don't know if we're going to get him to. Bob, would you come forward, please? Thank you. Bob and I wanted to hand out the awards. We do this every year. We find people that we think understand the senior issues, and we would like to recognize them because they're just really important to us at the legislature. So with that in mind, we're missing one person who should come in. He said he would be here about 11. He had something he had to do early, and that's Senator Kefalas. But the others are here. First one we have is Senator Martinez Huminek. So she would come forward. And the next one is upside down. Joann Ginal, Representative Joann Ginal. Appreciate it. And the next one up is Representative Lois Landgraf. And the next one, all the way from Montrose, is Representative Don Coram. And I just think that's special that he came all this way over. And having grown up in Lamar, Colorado, I appreciate the rural areas.
Thank you so much. Thank you very
much. And something we don't do every year is we have a person here we're giving a Lifetime Achievement Award to, and he was just kind of Mr. JBC from our viewpoint. Totally knowledgeable of the JBC and very, very protective of senior issues, and that's Senator Pat Steadman.
Seniors and on the JPC. You're welcome.
Mr. Morrow, where are you? There he is. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you a key player in the Colorado Senior Lobby. He is our absolute key connection to the state legislature, has been for many years, lobbyist with Dr. Cog, Denver Regional Council of Governments. Please give a warm welcome to Rich Morrow.
So we're going to start now with our legislative panel. Any or all of the legislators here would like to join us up at the panel or up at the table. I think it's going to be a pretty loose format, but basically I think what we're planning to do is give each of you a minute or two or maybe 5 seconds to say something if you'd like. And but we'd like to really focus this. We'd like to really focus this on questions from the audience and see if we can get some dialogue going, and we'll just kind of see where it takes us. Thank you.
So give me that mic, and you take the center one. All right, center mic. And what we're going to do is we're going to hand the microphone over to you, Jeanette. And Jeanette will come to you, raise your hand, and she'll come to you with any questions that you have. You may interject at any time. This is an interactive session. Jeanette?
Should we let each legislator say a couple words first?
Whatever you want, Rich. All yours.
Just start here with Representative Coram, and then when the panel's finished, we'll open it up for questions and answers.
Thank you all for honoring us here today. And I was a little confused as to why I was here. I thought you probably looked at my age and thought, well, we can maybe help him pick a nursing home or something. I didn't know what the idea was here, but I'm State Representative Don Coram. I live in Montrose, but I have about 7,500 square miles of territory, Montrose County, San Miguel County, Dolores, and Montezuma County. So what it means is from to the far end of my district, I'm about 400 miles from home. I'm 265 miles from my house, but a very large, beautiful district in southwest Colorado. I serve on the Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee, Transportation, Water Resources, Legislative Review, and a couple other committees. But it's great. It's a great honor to be able to serve the citizens of Colorado. I say that the R behind my name stands for rural, and rural issues are very, very dear to me. And it's not limited to one thing: transportation, education, health issues. We're a very, very diverse area, but we have lots of problems. One of the issues that we're facing right now is health insurance. Our Rocky Mountain Health just sold out. They lost $70 million on the Affordable Care Act, so they've sold out. We have the highest insurance rates in the state. We only have one carrier that's statewide, Anthem, and they've announced a 27% rate increase. So health issues are tremendous. I have people that were paying $700 a month, and now they're paying $1,600 a month. It's unaffordable. We need to do something. So that's one of the main things that I'm concerned about is health issues, and along with my agriculture and transportation issues. Many times constituents in my district, to see a doctor is a 200-mile trip. Think about that, 200 miles to go see a doctor. So we've got to really do some better things for rural health, and telemedicine is one of the things that will help, but that requires broadband. We don't have the service. Thank you.
Senator Beth Huminek here again, and what I wanted to just remind you all that everyone sitting in this room, every single one of these lives in this room, everybody that is in this facility, the people that you see out on the streets that you meet at church, every single person adds value and is important. And so I will continue to work on senior issues. I'm also working on mental health issues for juveniles, folks that are in our correctional facilities, as well as everyone else, because we're seeing more of that each and every day, and it's very important that our first responders have the awareness and get the training that they need to be able to help people when they are in distress because of a disorder that they have, or a disability, or whatever it might be, because as was mentioned before, the issues that we talk about down at the Capitol aren't partisan issues most of the time. 99.9% of the time, in my personal opinion, they're people issues. And people issues are something that we need to be very, very actively engaged in. And as I said before, I look forward to talking to you. Every single one of you is important. If you have something that is of a concern to you, then you need to reach out and let us know. I want you to have a good quality of life as you age and as you decide what you want to do. We need to make sure we've got a healthcare system that's not working. And be very careful about initiatives on the ballot that you see. Make sure that you understand what the unintended consequences and ramifications will be, because there will be some with some of them. So make the decisions in your heart of hearts that you can live with when you vote. But also remember that there are people that are working together, and I can say we have all worked together on bills down at the Capitol. And sometimes it doesn't take a bill. It takes working with the departments to try to get them to update and modify and change or remove their regulations because they're either not working or they need to be better. So I will continue to do that. I'm very actively engaged with children too. I'm a substitute teacher. I've taught at the proprietary college level as well. So education is important to me. Transportation. I know that transportation is a huge issue for seniors if you don't have a way to get places. I did sponsor in the Senate last year the Telehealth Telemedicine bill, which I hope will open access to facilities like this, nursing homes, small clinics in the rural areas, to have some access to care. It's not going to replace the personal visit with your doctor, but it's to enhance that access to care so that people don't have to maybe leave their homes to be able to get the medical care that they need. So I just want to impress upon you that when you have questions today, feel free to ask, and if you don't have a question now and you want to send a question later, I know I brought cards with me, and if you have access to a computer or a telephone, you can either email me or give me a call. So really, again, I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and just want you to know that I think we're all very passionate in what we do, and I will continue to work very diligently on mental health issues and senior issues and people issues.
Thank you very much. I'm State Representative Joann Ginal. I have served 2 terms in the House of Representatives, and I'm very proud of the work and the bills that I've put forth. Some have passed, some haven't passed, some have passed along with my colleagues here. The background that I come from is healthcare. I've also been a college professor early on in my career, but went into the pharmaceutical industry very early on, and have stayed there and gone from sales training, marketing, to medical liaison after I received my doctorate degree, which brought me out to the state of Colorado from the East Coast. My degree is from the College of Veterinary Medicine, and I specialize in reproductive endocrinology. I've worked in new product development within pharma and know what pharma does do as far as helping us to live better lives, to improve the quality of our life. And I have to say that after I retired, and getting into this area, which I want to stress that I am the only bioscience or healthcare professional right now that is in the House of Representatives. And so it's vital that my knowledge that I have from both the healthcare industry and my professional studies is a valuable asset to our legislators, on both sides of the aisle. I think in speaking with them and trying to have them understand what some of these bills coming through mean from my perspective versus their perspective, and sitting down and talking to them, it means a lot. And a lot of times they don't understand some of the nuances, and healthcare's changing every day. So I think I bring a very valuable perspective to the House of Representatives and to our legislature in general. Senior health care is extremely important to me. I ran the bill last year. It was House Bill 16-1102, which would look at the Drug Transparency Act, how are our drugs priced after they're approved by FDA. There is a lot of governmental regulation before a drug gets approved, and there should be. But why are we paying such exorbitant prices? Where does that price tag come from when a product gets approved by the FDA and is on the market now? Granted, there are negotiations that are done with Medicaid, Medicare, and various other insurance companies, but there's still a very high price tag. A lot of people now are blaming the health insurance companies for all of this across the board. I'm not saying that health insurance companies are the good guys, but there are 3 actual areas that we need to look at, not just health insurance. Health insurance is one, and it is in some part regulated. The other is hospital fees. That too, in a small part, is regulated. But what is not regulated and what is not being talked about are the pharmaceutical prices, which have to be negotiated, but they're not part of the conversation. And they should be part of that total conversation that we're having about healthcare costs and why are prescription drugs increasing. And the bill I brought forth, 1102, was a bipartisan bill. It was a bipartisan bill with not only myself in the House, but also Senators Newell and Senator Roberts in the Senate. So unfortunately, that bill did not pass out of committee. And there are a lot of things I learned from running that bill the first time, that maybe in working together with pharma, with health insurance companies, with various other organizations, that we can make this a better bill and be able to look into the cost of prescription drugs, which is affecting all of us. I'm also concerned about seniors and their housing situations, also about transportation for seniors. There's many other aspects that I could go on about in regards to healthcare. I sit on 3 committees currently. I am the Vice Chair of Health, Insurance, and Environment. I sit on Public Health and Human Services, and I am on Agriculture, Livestock, and Natural Resources. And all of that affects all of us in this room, and I'm very proud to be here. I'm very proud to be a part of the state legislature, and looking forward to another session so that we can make good bills for seniors and everybody in the state of Colorado. So thank you.
Thank you very much, and I really want to thank you for honoring me today and all the rest of us. We took a picture earlier and I put it out on Facebook and Twitter, and I just said senior lobby, and after I did that I thought people are going to get back to me and they're going to say, were you at the senior lobby or are you the senior lobby? Based on the people that were in the picture. And yesterday on my drive up, I guess I should first tell you I'm Lois Landgraf. I represent Southern El Paso County, and that includes Fort Carson. So my population is a large number of veterans, active duty, and of course retired soldiers and seniors because of that population. So it's I guess a double whammy, sort of. But I wanted to just tell you, yesterday when I was driving up, and I will be brief, I was thinking about the whole senior lobby title, and I started thinking, what is a senior? I looked it up to get the definition, and 2 things struck me. It said old age, and it said 65. Well, so I fall into one of those categories.
You know, if I may, a senior is someone older than I am. Right? I mean, isn't that what everybody thinks? Right? You know, who's a senior? Well, somebody who's older than we are, right?
That's exactly my point. I'm not sure I see anybody in here I would classify as a senior. So what I want to hear from you is exactly what constitutes a senior. After a certain age, things change. We all know that. Our hair color, well, not if you have a good hairdresser. Things do change, but at what point, and it really struck me, at what point am I going to feel like I'm old? Maybe you become a senior when you join the legislature. I don't know, but I'm anxious to hear from you what your issues are and why you consider those to be a senior issue. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Pat Steadman. I'm a state senator from Denver. I represent the central and southeast parts of Denver. The district starts at the Capitol building and ends at the Tech Center and the Aurora city limits, if that gives you some idea of whereabouts my district lies. I've served the past 6 years on the Joint Budget Committee. I am term limited this year, and I'm not on the ballot for re-election. This is my swan song and farewell. And I wished I could tell you that during my time in the legislature, I solved all the state's problems and everything's going to be fine. But even though that's what I set out to do when I ran for office, I have to admit now that I'm term limited and ending my service, I didn't solve all the problems I set out to solve. And there are a number that are going to be left for future legislatures to have to wrestle with. You're all familiar with the demographic shift that Colorado is going through. We talk about this silver tsunami or the graying of our population. The fact that folks over 80 are one of the fastest growing segments of our state population, just in terms of population growth. These are things the state's going to have to deal with, and they're going to force us to change the way we structure and deliver various services. And one of the real challenges in making those adjustments is going to be providing the financing for those and how that impacts the state budget. We have, in recent years, really increased the resources that we're committing to senior services. We've increased the Older Coloradans Act fund. There's more money than ever for Meals on Wheels and non-emergency medical transportation and a whole package of services that help seniors live healthy and independent in their homes and in their communities. And yet, with these demographic trends that we're seeing, there's going to be a lot more need for those things. We do have the Strategic Action Planning Group for Senior Services that is working to try to meet this challenge. The Joint Budget Committee has also commissioned some studies to look at gaps in services and needs and trends that the demographic shift is going to drive. There's a lot of work that's going to need to be done, and paying for all of it is going to become a bigger and bigger challenge. And one of the things, and this is probably a great segue for me to pass the microphone to my colleague, Senator Kefalas, one of the things that I was trying to work on, and I know he's been trying to work on for the past many years, is really looking at the senior homestead exemption and how that impacts the state budget, and whether that's really the best way to allocate those dollars in our budget to help seniors who are most in need. I personally believe that the current program is a little bit of a mismatch and does not necessarily target dollars to people who are in need. The current program favors only homeowners, not people who rent or live in assisted living or other kinds of arrangements. We're missing a lot of the population in terms of those who need to be receiving that kind of tax break and assistance. And as the future progresses, as demographic changes continue, I think we're going to see more people renting and more people in different sorts of arrangements as they age, to where the senior homestead exemption is going to become even more sort of misdirected and a product of a different time in how seniors lived and needed to be served. And so it's going to cry out for reform, and the gentleman next to me is who I'm going to pass the mantle to.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce, he just got here, Senator John Kefalas.
Thank you. Thanks to the Colorado Senior Lobby, I enjoy the relationship that we have working together on lots of issues. I'm glad to be here as a person, a baby boomer on the tail end, and perhaps, Rep. Landgraf was talking about how do you know if you're a senior or not, but I was, this morning I do what I call community conversations. I was at one of the local coffee shops in Fort Collins, and we were about to pay the bill, and the barista said, "Are you older than 55?" And I kind of had to think for a moment. I said, "Oh, yes." And we saved about $1.50, so I thought that was pretty good. But my name is John Kefalas. I represent Senate District 14, which is most of the city of Fort Collins. I've been in the legislature for 10 years. Like a lot of my colleagues, or all of my colleagues, I serve on various committees, including the Local Government Committee, Capital Development Committee, the Health Insurance Exchange Oversight Committee, Behavioral Health Transformation Council, and a few other things. But the main committee of reference is the Local Government Committee, and certainly the Capital Development Committee, which makes recommendations on capital development work to the JBC. Has been an interesting learning experience. I'll be brief, but I did want to touch on a little bit of what Pat was talking about. As you know, we have the senior homestead property tax exemption, which I believe the voters passed into the Constitution in 2000, and you know that it applies to folks 65 and older. They've had to have lived in a particular residence. They have to be property owners, live in a residence for 10 years. The current fiscal impact in the fiscal year that we're in, I think, is about $120 million. $136 million. And I know over the years there's been attempts at conversations around can the state afford that? And should we be at least willing to have a conversation about how do we target those resources to folks who are property owners who really need those resources? So I think that's a conversation that that should happen, and I'm happy to help facilitate or engage in that conversation. Another thing I'd like to mention is to show you that sometimes what we do at the Capitol does matter, and it does make a difference in people's lives. Back in 2014, I was the primary sponsor of a bill, the Senate Bill 14-180, which basically made significant improvements to the senior low-income dental program. In other words, dental services that are provided to seniors who don't have access to these particular dental services. And one of the checks and balances we have in the legislature is what's referred to as a post-enactment review clause. And this bill that we passed in 2014 had one of those, and I recently received information in response to various questions. And I'm happy to report that while there's still room for improvement, and I think Eileen is out here somewhere, and she's been very involved in this issue, we can say that for fiscal year 15-16, the number of seniors served and funds expended are as follows. Total number of unique seniors served is 2,828. By moving the dental program from the Department of Public Health and Environment over to Healthcare Policy and Finance, and doing a number of other things, we are indeed delivering care to people, I think, in a more effective way. Total number of dental procedures performed, 19,591. Average number of dental procedures provided per senior, 7. Total amount paid to qualified grantees. So these are taxpayer dollars that are administered by Healthcare Policy and Finance, and they go to out into the communities to provide grants. So in my neck of the woods in Fort Collins, the Health District of Northern Larimer County administers this, but 2.9 million approximately. The appropriation from the JBC and from the long bill is about $3 million. So in 15-16, we spent about 2.9 million. Average amount paid to qualified grantees per senior at $1,000, a little over $1,000. So there's an example of something that was a collaborative effort in my judgment that I think ultimately is benefiting seniors. And of course, Eileen and other folks would say that there's still room for improvement, which we'll work on. The last thing I'll mention is, and I know Ed would want me to talk about this, is the issue of affordable housing. We did, Pat and other folks probably have discussed that. That is a big issue. It's a crisis for all of the various demographics. More and more people are living longer. Some folks are on fixed incomes. And one type of affordable housing is manufactured housing or mobile home communities. So I think part of my claim to fame is that I've been working on this issue for the last 3 years. If the metric you use is passing legislation, I've not been successful. But if you use other metrics where we've elevated the discussion, and I think we're getting to a better place as far as involving various stakeholders, I think we have made some progress. But I think the issue of manufactured housing, mobile home parks is important. It's an example of unsubsidized affordable housing, and for lots of reasons, we're losing this type of, this part of the affordable housing continuum. And I appreciate that the senior lobby and Dr. Cog and other folks are involved in the discussions, and we'll see where that leads us. And I welcome my colleagues who are impacted by these issues if they would like to participate, because ultimately it does need to be a bipartisan thing if we're to get, making real progress on this. And as far as finally, oh, that's very powerful. Rich always does that to me around this time. I just want to mention one more thing, and then I'll be quiet, and hopefully there's time for some questions, or I don't know, I'll give out awards or whatever. I kind of forgot why I came here. Sorry about that. But Senator Steadman, Pat, who, by the way, he is term limited, and I think he's the only one, and he deserves a lot of credit because he's been a real champion for a lot of things. He's been, I think, a grounding force on the Joint Budget Committee, and I think overall the JBC, certainly this year and in past years, has worked well together, and I think overall there's been good bipartisan collaboration. We don't 100% agree on things, but frankly, Pat Steadman has some institutional knowledge that is pretty darn incredible, and he does, I think he gets the lifetime one. I think it's well deserved. But on the issue of housing and property owners versus renters, we know that a lot of folks rent their place or they're living in different living situations. We did also pass the improvements to the PTC rebate program. Many of you are familiar with the property tax rent heat rebate program, and I think that was a bill that we may have done in 2014, but that's also made some improvements there. And that's a way for renters, seniors, elders, who can get some sort of a rebate based on their heat expenses or other kinds of things. So there are examples where we're trying to make a difference, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you to our panel. We're going to open it up for questions now, and I know many of the people in the audience, and I know you're not timid people, so we're expecting a lot of questions.
I would be interested in hearing what your thoughts are about the Tabor Amendment and the dilemma that brings up for Colorado.
Ooh, gee, who wants to take that one?
I'll start. As someone who's written the state budget for the past 6 years,
And who's term limited.
and who's written my last state budget, the Tabor Amendment is a restriction on how much revenue the state can take in and spend each year for the people. And we have been recently in a situation where we were over the limit. When you all did your income tax returns earlier this year, you claimed like a $14 or $16 refund or something. I think that's silly. I think that $14 or $16 doesn't mean much to each of us individually. That'll buy you a nice lunch these days. Take 2 people to the movies, not even. But if we all left that $16 with the state, it equals $100 million, or somewhere in that neighborhood. And that would make a lot of difference for a lot of people. And I really question the wisdom of just drawing an arbitrary limit and saying everything over the limit gets refunded, when those dollars that were over the limit were generated by our ordinary tax rates. Nobody increased the tax rates to create those surpluses. We just had more people shopping in our stores and working in our economy and participating in the Colorado economy to generate that additional tax revenue. And those dollars could have gone to roads and schools and senior services and mental health and all the other priorities that we know we're not really quite keeping up with. When I was talking about those demographic pressures earlier, those same things that are putting more strain on the systems for providing services for seniors are also straining our highways, they're straining our school systems, they're straining our jails and our prisons, and all across the board of government services, we have a lot of pressures, and yet we have some arbitrary limits. Now, I've said something provocative. I'll let some of my colleagues respond.
I see somebody grab the mic down here, so.
Actually, it was pushed down to me.
You've been set up, I think.
But I'm a rural representative, and I am in support of Tabor, simply because it was put together by the voters. And I don't think it's up to the General Assembly to try to change that. With that said, I did support the hospital provider fee going to an enterprise. Now, the reason that I supported it is I felt that this is an issue that is going to be before the courts. We had our own legislative council that said it was not legal to change it to an enterprise. We had the Attorney General that said that it was. I felt that it was a situation, especially, as I said, I vote for rural Colorado. The hospital provider fee is very important to my district. And I felt that this was an issue that would be challenged in court. And due to the fact that we're not projecting any refunds in the future here for a while, that was the time to stop kicking that can down the road and make that decision. With that said, I'm also in support of Tabor because, frankly, I don't trust the General Assembly. We put a lot of programs in that are feel-good programs. But with all the demands that we have on our budget, I think we put programs together that maybe we shouldn't have had, maybe we didn't need, we could find another way of doing it. 25 years ago, I was on a school board, and I never voted to support a grant. Because my experience with them was, you got a grant, you had 100% funding. The following year, you had 75% funding. The third year, or you had 50%, and the fourth year, you were on your own. And we were left the choice of funding a program that maybe we didn't really need, maybe the community didn't really want, and so I'm going to support Tabor until the voters of Colorado tell me that is not the way to go. So I think we have a very intelligent electorate, and they will make that decision. Are there some limitations on it? Absolutely. But as a person who's basically signed my own paycheck my whole life, I've had to make those hard choices. I didn't get everything that I wanted. My want factor was a lot more than my need factor. And I think that's what you find in government. Want is much higher than need.
On this, or we?
I was just going to say that part of the challenge in being in the legislature is you have to look at every issue that comes before you. This year, a lot of the bills that had fiscal notes did not pass because we simply didn't have the money in the budget. However, I am a firm believer that the government should be for the people, by the people, and we have gotten away from that. So I think there are those of us that are down at the legislature currently that are really trying to work together to try to listen to the people, but I have faith in the voters. If the voters vote to change Tabor, so be it. We will work with that. Yes, there are limitations, but the voters saw a need for that at one point in time. Just like the voters in this year's election across the nation are going to have to make some tough choices, and they want to see some change. I was asked one time, and I get asked this periodically, what was your agenda going into the legislature, and did you get what you wanted done? There's nothing that I came into the legislature with an agenda. As far as a specific issue, what my agenda is to try to do the best job that I can with the issues that are brought forward and make the best decisions that I can for all of you. That's what you elect us to do. And if you don't like what we're doing, then you can elect us out of office. But the challenge is balancing the budget, keeping the general public in a position where things that we make laws for are going to be good for you, because very oftentimes there are unintended consequences. And years ago, when the Tabor Amendment was passed, folks at that time felt it was what was needed. So, you know, don't second guess what we're thinking. It's up to the public to decide, and that was part of what Tabor was about, was that the public needed to vote on things. So we have a challenge with balancing the budget. You know, I have the greatest respect for Senators Steadman and that joint budget committee. I knew that they would be able to get that balance this year, and that we didn't need some of these outside things to happen that were only going to be temporary short-term fixes. When you have a temporary short-term fix and people start getting used to it, and then it goes away, just like Representative Coram said, that's a problem. We need to look farther down the road and make sure that whatever we're doing is going to be beneficial, not just for the people here now, but the people who are coming and the people who will be here when we are no longer here. So I just wanted to mention that too, because we have to work with the businesses. The business community is very, very important to the economic diversity and well-being of our state. So, you know, there's a lot of issues on both sides of the question of whether we should have Tabor or not, depending on who you talk to. But the bottom line is, the voters, should have the final say on that, not the legislature.
Thank you. I believe that Tabor, at the time that it was brought forth, may have had a lot of good aspects to it. And the one thing that I see with Tabor right now, and the very positive thing, and for the most part, I think that if we could get Tabor off and out of our state, the only good thing about Tabor is that our voters, you, have the opportunity to vote on tax increases and what we want to do. And to me, that's the most important thing, because that's your voice and not the legislator's voice. So for that reason, I think Tabor is good. For the other reasons, I think it holds back a lot of things that we might be able to do. So that's my very short commentary.
Yes, we're ready for the next question. Okay. Jeanette, who do we have? Yeah, we have people listening on the way.
I'm wondering how each member of the panel feels about Amendment 69. That's Colorado Care, universal care.
I will
start. You wanna start?
Yes, so I'm on both health committees, and I'm also on the Health Exchange Oversight Committee and the Mental Health Task Force. And there are problems with the exchange, there's no doubt about it, but going to a universal system would be absolutely horrific. I've spent some time talking to various physicians who, if you try to go to a doctor today, I'm guessing that you're in the same boat that everybody else is, you have a hard time getting an appointment. It can take weeks, months, depending on what it is, which is why we often rely on our urgent cares or even the freestanding emergency rooms, which is a whole nother conversation. Universal health care would be an absolute disaster. And I know this for a fact because I moved here from Seattle and I worked for the University of Washington, started the cardiovascular health research, well, doesn't matter. People came down from Canada constantly to get their health care. If they had anything other than a cold, the flu, they had to come to Washington State to get treatment because it wasn't available. It wasn't available in a timely fashion. Another example, I was standing in line with a woman and her daughter. We were getting on a flight to somewhere. She was here visiting. She was going back to England where she lived. Her daughter had a cast, and we started chatting, and she said her daughter had fallen, broken her arm, and that she was so grateful that it happened in the United States and not back in England where they lived, because her daughter's arm would not have gotten treated in a timely fashion. Now they both have universal health care. It's a system that might sound good, but it's not effective. It would be a disaster. Not to mention the tax increase to everybody. So read that carefully. I've not really met anybody. I've had a town hall. I invited people to come and speak on both sides. There was one woman in the audience who said, "Why didn't you have somebody here in support of it?" And I said, because I couldn't find anybody. I couldn't find a single organization that supported the Amendment 69. And I'm sure you guys have an opinion.
I support reforming our healthcare system to a single-payer system. I've had that position for many years. Amendment 69 is not about turning our healthcare system into Canada's or England's, but it is an attempt to provide universal coverage in our state. And that goal I support. I'm not supporting Amendment 69. I'm not speaking out against it either, because the insurance industry and the pharmaceutical industry and those who profit off of healthcare are going to spend millions of dollars speaking out against it, defending their bottom lines, and they're going to kill it with their millions of dollars, and they don't need my help. It is not, there are some things about the way it is constructed that I think are flawed. I think trying to do this by a citizen initiative where you ask people to vote yes or no on an up or down proposition that then goes into the state constitution is not the right way to do this. Healthcare is incredibly complex, And the idea that Amendment 69 has it all right and is ready to go into the Constitution, I don't think anybody can defend that. If we're going to engage in healthcare reform, which I think is something that's imperative, and that the current system is worsening all the time, and the cost increases on the Western Slope are a great example of that, it needs to be done through a legislative process with a whole lot of people at the table and a whole lot of give and take and vetting and amending and a lot of hard work that the initiative process does not offer us the opportunity to do. I have tried really carefully to not speak on this topic publicly because I'm very concerned that the millions of dollars that those that profit from healthcare plan to spend this November are going to poison the waters for a conversation about healthcare reform and a conversation about single payer, and I think that's very unfortunate, and I don't want to be part of poisoning the well with those folks.
Well, thank you, and thanks for the question. I suppose my position, my current position, is perhaps somewhat similar to what Pat shared. So conceptually, I support a universal health care system. I think our current system, while improved pre-ACA to post-ACA, and I know we can have a lot of discussion about that, still has a lot of problems. There are issues with insurance premiums continue to rise. I mean, I could go on and on. There are issues with folks being underinsured. There are issues with access, especially in underserved rural areas. So I think the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act has, in my opinion, and based on the data that I've looked at, has made improvements since it was passed into federal law in 2010. I serve on the Health Insurance Exchange Oversight Committee with the representative, and we have heard lots of interesting stories, and there still is a lingering concern regarding the financial viability, sustainability of the health insurance exchange. It's a complicated thing. So to answer the question more directly, conceptually, I am in support of a universal health care system. I came out early in support of Amendment 69, but like anything, I have questions now. I have lingering questions that have not been fully answered. My questions include, for example, because the way this is set up and the fact that it's in the Constitution, and I know why people are trying to put it in the Constitution, that's problematic. I think we put too many things in the Constitution, and when there are unintended consequences, it becomes really difficult. So that's a concern, even though of the 4 ballot measures, statewide ballot measures that have been approved by the Secretary of State, 3 out of the 4 are amendments, proposed amendments to the Colorado Constitution, and only 1 is a, quote, proposition, which is a, quote, statutory change, and that happens to be the end-of-life choices proposal. But to go back to Amendment 69, I have concerns about how the Colorado Care will handle, for example, a big responsibility of Medicaid, which is long-term services and supports long-term care. Those questions haven't been answered. There are a lot of folks who are on Medicaid and have Medicaid waivers, persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I'm being honest with folks. I have questions about that. So there are a number of questions, like Senator Steadman, like Pat. I need to continue to deliberate on this. I don't think I have a responsibility to tell you how I'm going to vote on this, because I'm still not quite there yet. But in concept, I think a universal health care system is what we need. Our current system is still broken, and we need to find ways, whether at the state level or certainly at the national level, to make sure that our delivery of health care and what we get out of it is the way to do things. The other issue, if you look at the language, of course, it's subject to approval by the federal government. In the ACA, as many of you know, there was a waiver provision, the 1332 waiver provision, and so ultimately if the voters pass it, it would set up this board of trustees that would be appointed initially, and then they would do all the work to apply for a federal waiver, and then assuming that waiver is approved, then ultimately this thing could be fully operational, I believe, in January of 2019, and there would be an elected board. And if you look at the language, there are provisions, I think, for addressing some of the details. You can't be too prescriptive in these things, although it is somewhat prescriptive. That's kind of where I'm at, and I'm happy to talk with folks afterwards. And that was one of the topics we discussed this morning at the coffee thing, and it was quite an interesting discussion. And I've been sharing the Blue Book has the third draft of these various, the Blue Book analyses by our nonpartisan staff. And I would encourage people to look at that because I think it's generally, they try to be as objective as possible.
State Representative Joann Ginal, I echo my two colleagues in the fact that in hearing Representative Landgraf speak about working in Seattle and having people come from Canada to get good health care, I've heard the opposite. I have neighbors who recently moved next door to me from Germany who are here on a green card, and I've discussed this issue with them, and they have talked nothing but very positive things about the way the universal health care is covered in Germany and other European countries, and that they're very satisfied with it. And what they found, here in the United States as far as coverage, and we are the richest country in the world, and yet we have the highest cost for health care, and it still baffles me. Am I in favor of universal health care? Yes, absolutely. I think we need that. I think the Affordable Care Act, as Senator Kefalas has mentioned, has helped us in many ways to provide coverage to people who may have been denied in the past, and helped children, and allowed younger adults to stay on their parents' insurance for a period of time to get them on their feet, especially with the debt that they incur from college and higher education. I do believe that we have a health exchange program here who has been working extremely hard. We were one of the states that opted into a state health exchange. Have we had a lot of issues? Yes. Are we working on those issues to try to correct them? Yes. Is there more to do? Absolutely. And there is that health implementation committee, health exchange implementation committee, that is working very hard to help make those changes occur. As far as Amendment 69 goes, I too was in firm support of it for several years in the making. I have some questions about it as well that have not been totally answered, that I have asked, that my constituents ask, and I still don't get specific answers, like transparency of the board. Like veterans, they're very concerned. Are veterans going to lose their benefits? That comes up to me many, many times. Also, the question that not all of our prescription drug costs are going to be covered, and this may be a major concern, especially for seniors, especially for those with chronic diseases. I am not sure if some of the federally funded programs for women who may become pregnant are going to be covered. This is an issue that if this comes to the state and is a state issue, will those programs be covered? So I have concerns. Am I in favor of universal health care across the board? Absolutely. I still would like the questions for Amendment 69 answered in total to make me feel more comfortable about this issue. I will still work with the health exchange and the health insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies to find out the best answer for this question. But again, it's a constitutional issue that may be in our state constitution, and we won't be able to change that. If it were statutory, that might be another issue. So I remain neutral at this point, and I'm saying that this was the first time I've said this in public, and I just want you to know that there are answers that I need to bring to my constituents and to myself to make me feel that this Amendment 69 is going to be better for the people of Colorado and help the people of Colorado than what we are working on currently as far as health insurance and health care coverage.
I agree with my colleagues that we need health care reform. All of the legislators that I have talked to from across the country at the numerous meetings, because I serve on a lot of national committees as well as the Health and Human Services Committee on the Senate. I am part of the Legislative Oversight Committee for the Health Exchange, as well as on the Mental Illness and the Juvenile Criminal Justice System Legislative Oversight Committee. I have a number of healthcare things that I serve on, so I talk to a lot of people. And I also have had the opportunity to engage in even more in-depth conversations with some of the meetings and conferences that I've been attending over the interim. And one of the things that the folks from Vermont said regarding a single-payer healthcare system is it was going to bankrupt their state. Their governor was a person who actually supported this. And it is based on a model in England. And when he put the pen to paper, found out that it was going to be very detrimental to the state in a variety of different ways. And he said, we can't do this, it will kill our state. I do not believe that this is the right pathway, and I especially don't think it should be going into the Constitution, because once something is in the Constitution, it is very, very hard to change. So if it's not working, or there are catastrophic unintended consequences that result of this, with businesses moving out, businesses putting their people on part-time status or laying people off. I've talked to a number of companies, from small companies to the large companies to the entrepreneurs, and our governor has been very, very active, as well as a number of the mayors in our state, in trying to go to other countries as well as other states to bring in business so that we have employment for our folks here in Colorado. We have a highly educated population here. We have a very diverse population. All levels of folks in economic, socioeconomic situations. If we go to this particular one, I have some concerns about the cost. It's going to cost every single person in this room money. Capital gains are going to be taxed. The employers are taxed. If they make a profit, the capital gains are going to be taxed there. If you have stocks, anything, if you don't think it's not going to affect you, it will. So we have to be very, very careful about what we do. Do we need healthcare reform? Absolutely. Has the Affordable Care Act worked the way it was intended to work? Not totally, no. And it's driven costs up. So I do think we have to continue to look for solutions and work with the folks in the insurance industry and the actuaries to find out how they're calculating our premiums on a monthly basis. You know, one of the concerns that I had with the health exchange, which I have asked them to prove me wrong, but I don't see them being viable long term on the path that they're going. They've made dramatic improvements in the last couple of years, but they're gonna have to be a lot more improvements made because premiums are still continuing to rise there too. Every single person in this room is important, so just keep that in mind. You are important. You need to be able to be reliant on a healthcare coverage. So be very careful about all of the initiatives and make sure that you understand. And if it is a constitutional one, just make sure that you understand that it will be very hard to change.
Representative Coram, to wrap us up.
Thank you very much. You know, my greatest hope in life is to die of nothing. My greatest fear is to die waiting for health care. And that's what I'm seeing in rural Colorado. The Affordable Care Act has not worked in rural Colorado. We've had skyrocketing rates, we've had hospitals closing, we've had doctors leaving, and I'm concerned that this is the nail in the coffin for rural Colorado for health care. I've talked to several businesses. My district borders 3 states. I've talked to several businesses, and I said, what are you going to do if this passes? We're moving across the state line. We'll only pay for those that actually work in Colorado. We work in multiple states, but this is something that we cannot afford, and we will be leaving the state of Colorado should this pass. So I have been very outspoken in opposition to 69, and I will continue to do so. But with that said, I thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Panel, we appreciate it very much. Maybe this one's better. And can we get a hand for our panel?
I would like to just quickly remind everybody that if you want to go ahead and join Colorado Senior Lobby today, there is a little postcard in there. You can leave it at the back on the table, and that way you won't have to mail it. If you join by the end of the month, you'll get a free 1-year membership if you're a new individual coming to the Colorado Senior Lobby. So please, it's in your packets, you can leave it at the back table, and we will be quickly giving another award, and then we will be transitioning to our business meeting.
Want to, before we get going here, I wanted everybody just to remind a little bit of history and get everybody updated. You know, we passed House Bill 1033 in order for the state of Colorado to get a topical, now sort of Polaroid of where we need to be going with older adults in our state. That strategic aging panel had its first meeting about a year ago today, actually it was close, the 27th, 23rd, something like that. And our Karen Brown on the board of directors for Senior Lobby is also a representative on that panel, and we're just going to get a little update from Karen if we can.
Sure. Is this on? Oh, yeah,
it is.
Okay. Yes, as Steve just said, the Strategic Action Planning Group on Aging was actually convened last August. August 17th was our first meeting. It is actually a group commissioned through the statutes that appoints 23 governor-appointed members representing a wide variety of the aging population to create a 15-year comprehensive strategic action plan on aging for the state of Colorado. An enormous task. Our first report is due out in November. We actually have 3 reports due. One, November of 2016, another, November of 2018, and the third in 2020. We've actually been meeting and formulated 6 different committees, and in the back of the room on the table I'll put some of these little flyers. The committees encompass physical community, which is transportation and housing, workforce development, health and wellness, supportive community, family economic security, outreach and communications, and public finance. We've had members from the commission actually serve on those committees, as well as people from the public, and I would invite you all to participate. There are multiple ways that you can participate. You can actually attend the meetings. For example, this Monday, between 9 and 12, we'll be at the Dr. Cog offices downtown. And on this little flyer, there's a notice of the website, and it shows you where the meetings are. You can actually attend in person. You can join by phone. And you have a chance to provide public comment both at the start of the meeting as well as at the end of the meeting. You can attend any of the committee meetings, again, in the same format, either in person or by phone. And we need your input. This is going to be a plan addressing the whole gamut of the aging industry for the next 15 years. And all of your feedback, your input, your concerns, your issues, and your potential solutions are really important to our group. So that would be really the guts of what we've been up to, what we're doing. Again, please, I encourage you to stop by, grab a sheet, a little flyer talking about the task force, and we'd love to have you involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. All right, we're going to be wrapping this up. We're going to wrap this up. We're going to have our business meeting. Again, the Colorado Senior Lobby has 2 significant events each year. One is its Senior Day at the Capitol, which is held at the end of March, usually the first week of April, end of March. We always encourage you to attend that, and our annual meeting where we do business and elect a board of directors, and that's going to be happening forthwith. And in the meantime, please remember that we are the music makers, and we are the dreamers of dreams, wandering by lone sea breakers and sitting by desolate streams, world losers and world forsakers on whom the pale moon gleams. Yet, we are the movers and shakers of the world, it seems. Have a good day. Thank you.